quite surprised when we received your proposal regarding the topic, which is called Green Economy, International Opportunities.
So my question is, do you think that these technological advancements and changes are influencing the behavior, or does it allow us not to change, just to believe in technology? That would be my question.
I think that the consciousness in the U.S. varies from place to place. It certainly varies, within the population. But it's more than you think it is. And I would say the green movement per se is growing in its strength. Certainly young people are more cognizant of these things than older population. Vehicles are popular, think about it. The Prius is a status symbol now. People drive a Prius to show that their energy, they care about the environment, and it's now a status symbol. Like it used to be driving a Mercedes was a status symbol. So over time, if we implement some kind of market-based incentives, the price of energy rises, then people will change their behavior. And I do think behavior change has to be part of it. McKinsey has done a study where they've looked at each of the different components to how we address climate change. And they've said that the easiest is really energy conservation, just reducing the waste of energy. I think it's something like 25% of the total pie can come from that alone. Yes, changes in behavior make a difference, but market-based incentives can produce those changes in behavior. It varies in the U.S., no question. Not everybody is, green environmental movement, etc. But among young people, it's far more important. And I think that's encouraging.
Then you see that the carbon emission of the US are twice as high as within the EU, even 5 or 10 times higher than the developing countries. And if you look at it in this way, I'm pretty sure that you could make binding contracts with the developing countries. So why can't we look at the problem in this way? Thank you.
Well, I think, the problem with looking at emissions purely on a per capita basis is that then assumes that everything else is kept equal, that GDP per capita is the same, and obviously it's not. As your economy grows per capita, you would expect higher emissions per capita. Now, the US and the EU is probably a little bit more balanced in comparison than the United States, say, versus a developing country. But even the US versus the EU, there's big differences in geography, differences in the density of where people live. The US is a big geographic area and has not historically, one of the reasons Europe is a little bit more efficient per se is transportation networks are better developed here. Urban density is more common here, and urban transportation networks tend to be very strong. Public transportation networks, much better developed here. It's going to take us a long time to catch up to Europe in that regard. In the US, we're more spread out. We're much more of an automobile-based society. And we also have, large parts of the country that are closer to the Sun Belt and, rely more heavily on air conditioning, which obviously drives up your energy consumption as well. So there are geographic differences that make different regions hard to compare apples to apples. Over time, we hope we can learn from each other. And there are things Europe can do that does better that the United States can learn from Europe, and vice versa.
So my question is, do you think it's ethically okay to burn cereals, to use cereals to produce fuel for internal combustion engines?
So I assume by that you mean using corn to produce ethanol and ethanol into the engine.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an issue that people are very aware of in the States. And that's why there's been an attempt to move lot of technology directed at moving away from coal and towards other soluble plant materials which are not edible in order to produce ethanol. And there's a lot of research that's going into that, and it's very promising, frankly. I think in the long run, we are better off moving towards clean sources of electricity generation and then electrifying our fleet so that you reduce the need for any kind of fuel for the internal combustion engine. And I think that's the direction we're going to go. I've spoken to people here in Austria who are very skeptical about that. A lot of companies here in Austria are very dependent upon traditional internal combustion engine industry products, cars, parts for cars. And I've heard some skepticism, how quickly will this develop? But I believe it's going to develop very quickly. We just bought 4 Chevy Volts for the embassy in Vienna. And the Chevy Volt is constructed such that you use only electricity for your first, I think it's roughly 50 kilometers. It's a hybrid. It has both a gasoline engine and electric, but it only uses the electric. It does not use the gasoline engine for the first 50 kilometers. And we looked at our usage, and our usage in our maintenance shop was about 35 kilometers a day. And the car has a place to spend the night and get charged every night. So we realized if we went to the Chevy Volt, we would buy no fuel. The only downside is, my understanding is, Chevrolet figured this out. As you know, if you let gasoline sit in your tank, it'll go bad. So if you never burn any fuel, your gas in the tank will go bad. So they have a computer switch that every 6 months forces you to use 1 tank of gas. But again, if you just don't put so much gas in the tank, you don't have to worry about that either. So our intent at the embassy is to move to completely electrify our maintenance shop fleet. We have real estate all over Vienna, so we have all these guys who go around and maintain it. Let them use the Chevy Volt, and we think we can eliminate any fuel consumption whatsoever. Now, if society starts to move in that direction and people begin to realize how much money they can save by not putting fuel in the tank, and you can generate the electricity from some green source, then you can have a dramatic impact. And I think that's the direction we're headed. That seems to be the thinking in the United States. That's why we have so much research and so much money going into making batteries for cars. And it'll move us to electrifying our fleet. Then the issue becomes, how do you generate that electricity? And you have to move to wind and solar and renewables to generate as much of that electricity as possible, and then you can have dramatic impact.
Thank you.